All right. Hey guys, welcome back to another video from culturetoronto.com. Today I'm joined with a really special guest. His name is Mohsen. He's been a friend and helper and resource and ally to Culture Toronto for years, really for years, and he's also a big Dune fan, and that's kind of what we're gonna talk about today. Before we begin, Mohsen, do you mind introducing yourself a little bit?
Not at all. I'm more than happy to. My name's Mohsen. I'm here in lovely Toronto, Canada, home of Culture Toronto, where I've helped Sharif run several events. You'll see me if you click around on the website in a couple of photos in cosplay as like Aladdin, as Lancer from Fate Zero, as a couple of things. But uh, basically, Sharif and I actually went to university together, and even though our circles didn't really connect up too much at that time, um, it's always a great conversation with him because we had similar interests. And yeah, it's nerd out time. I do apologize if I sound a little bit off. Yesterday was like a hell of a night, but I'm
You
here.
sound great.
I'm a little sandy, and I'm ready to talk like a magnum opus of
Yes.
the science fantasy genre.
Yeah, we're gonna do a deep dive, man. We're gonna go deep. So
Oh,
just
oh, oh yeah, I got my professorial coat on. Let me know if you want my prof glasses on. I've got those too.
hey, can you show off that shirt a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. This is actually something that I got
Oh my
from
goodness.
Culture Toronto. Princess Mononoke is one of my favorite ever
Same.
Ghibli films. And it actually goes into a lot of the moral grayness that we're going to be talking about with Frank Herbert's Dune, and a little bit with how Denis Villeneuve presents his characters versus how they are in the book. Now, I'm going to try to keep my end of things as spoiler free as I can in terms of like what's
Good point.
coming down the line.
No,
Um,
there's gonna be spoilers, man. There's gonna be
yeah,
spoilers.
we're going to be talking some spoilers about the
Yeah.
movie, the characters, the various things at play. But as most of you watching this probably know, the current in theaters film doesn't end where the book ends. It's part one. And so I don't want to, I will do my level best not to give away anything
True.
from where the film ends. The film ends with meeting Chani and Stilgar out in the deep desert. He and Jessica are taken into the Fremen fold, and he sees one of the Fremen riding one of the sandworms for the first time, which is just a mind blowing shot. Like,
God damn, man. It's just, can we just, okay, I just want to start with a few things, okay? Number one, the movie is just beautiful to look at. It's like, I don't, it might be the best story, it might be the best adaptation from storyboard to film that I may have ever seen.
yeah,
It
that's
just looks
honestly
like a
very
real
fair.
storyboard. It looks perfect.
Yeah, it is definitely a very visual book. Like, you notice this difference with okay, so one of the big things about the novel is that you are constantly able to see behind the curtain. You know what people are thinking all the time.
Mm.
And the way that that came across in the older Dune film was all these
Oh, the
whispered
voiceovers.
asides. Yeah, it was all the
It was
whispered voiceovers.
The Dexter voiceover.
Exactly, which is one way to do it. But over here, what because you have a visual storyteller of the caliber of Denis Villeneuve, he's able to bring across a lot of the emotion that's there, even if you're not getting like the word for word play of, oh, this is what Paul's thinking in this moment, this is what Duncan's thinking in this moment. It's based on the acting, camera angle, surroundings, and everything, and they just perfection.
Yeah, okay, so the next thing is that I was really like moved in a way because I felt like our protagonist Paul kind of represents oh, what a cup. Our protagonist Paul represents this like kind of Messiah slash Mahdi slash prophet type character, and
Yeah.
his revelation and style of revelation is very reminiscent of the Prophet Muhammad, and I just couldn't help making like so many religious comparisons, and the Arabic is like all over
Yeah.
it.
Well, and all of that's there for a reason. So, like a little bit of history behind the book for the people that don't know. Frank Herbert wrote and released the first Dune novel back in 1965, according to my notes.
I think so.
And
Yeah.
um, the thing is, the book was released in 1965, but he didn't start writing it until he did 6 years of research. He actually went to Saudi Arabia. Like he saw these desert tribes, and he did a lot of research about the history of colonial powers through these desert regions. Uh, and the thing is, like in the 1960s, and be considering the time frame that he came to adulthood in, he was watching the oil and the energy crises of that era. And he also saw a lot of the political turmoil on all sides during
Mm-hmm.
that era. So, what you need to understand, above and beyond anything else, and Frank Herbert himself said this several times when he was interviewed, the point of the Dune series, not just the first book, but Dune, Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, God Emperor of Dune, all of these books, the point of them is to wake people up to the fact that you should never trust a charismatic leader, never trust a single point of authority, question them always.
Damn, that's
You
a
get a
that we're taking a twist already, man.
Yeah, because this plays it into Paul's revelation as this Messiah figure. Like
But
within the novel,
isn't Paul a little dynamic?
he is dynamic. So you see, especially in the film and even in the book, that Paul is this young man. He's, if I remember correctly, in the book, he's like 16. He's a child,
Hmm.
uh, and this is like a 30-year-old going, no, 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 16. You think you know things? You don't
You
know
don't know
anything. You don't know
shit.
anything until you're like 25.
You shouldn't
Uh,
even talk until you're like 30, bro. Like on camera. Don't stay off camera, guys, until you're
yeah,
30.
TikTok will hurt you. I am so glad that all I have to do is go through old Facebook posts and hit delete. I do not have video evidence of my cringe phases.
Same.
And yes, phases. I went through a few. Uh, but like the thing with Paul is, yes, his gradual rise into this messianic figure does in many ways mirror the rise of the Prophet Muhammad as a religious figure and as a political figure. That Prophet Muhammad, until his 40s, was just a respected man within the tribe that he was a part of. He
Hmm.
was seen as a merchant, someone with leadership skills, someone who was very truthful, but who didn't really have any ambitions. And you see that in Paul in the beginning, where he's talking to his father, going, I don't know that I'm ready to be the leader of House Atreides. I don't know how to be you. And
Yeah.
played to perfection Oscar Isaac as the Duke Leto, just going, look, I wasn't ready either. No one ever is. But you'll come to it in your own way. And over the course of this film, and in the course of this section of the book, you see Paul as not only his Bene Gesserit and Mentat training start to take effect as he gets older and starts to apply himself, but also just the exposure to the spice in the atmosphere, how that reacts with his biology, with his training, and awakens these things inside him. That in the same way that the Prophet Muhammad didn't have his first religious vision until he was 40 and meditating, Paul has like these sort of hazy dreams where things kind of happen, kind of don't. Things could go this way, they could go this way. But then when he arrives on Arrakis and
Hmm.
he starts coming into his own and he starts experiencing the spice uh, on accident, that's when his prophecies come into sharper focus, and he can kind of understand what's going on, and he can kind of see
Mm-hmm.
beyond and understand that, oh, like in the beginning of the film, it's just like, I see you sitting with a Fremen where he's talking to Duncan, Idaho, and Duncan's just like, oh, cool, that means I find them. That's great.
Yeah.
But he's just like, yeah, but you die in a room, and he doesn't have like a time scale for it. But then he arrives on Arrakis. He has these initial visions and everything, and then he tells his mother, it's just like, I know that you're pregnant. And she's just like, how do you know that? I barely know that. Um,
Like
but
that's so awesome, man. You know, like the Timothy Chalamet, shout out to him because his his acting of getting revelation was pretty damn good. It would
yeah.
have been stressful. It would have been, you know, you would have not cared about your physical appearance. Like you see him almost drooling and like crying, and like you know, it's just he's
Well,
just
because
seeing.
he's not present in himself anymore. He's in a different time place. Like, okay, this is a fun thought experiment. Imagine a new color,
Okay.
a color that isn't a recombination of some other colors that you've seen. The human mind can't actually do it. And it's a very similar thing to like the way that bats and dolphins have echolocation and sonar, that it's a sense to them that we don't have. Can we imagine it and visualize it through the medium of film and special effects? Kind of, but are we accurate in what we're showing? We have no way of knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you see in Paul's prophecy, and how Denis Villeneuve and Timothy Chalamet bring it across, as you're saying, very clearly, that he's lost to himself in the moment. To any outsider, it looks like he's just zoning out, or he's having an allergic reaction to the spice, or like he's
A seizure,
unwell.
like one of those, not the grand mal seizures, the other one I forgot the name, the one where you just look dazed.
Yeah, but for him, he's having an extrasensory experience. It
Yeah.
is something that he is biologically and experientially not ready for. He's never had something like this,
Mm-hmm.
and it's questionable whether the human mind or body is even capable of handling something like that. And it comes across very, very well. Um,
I got a point here. You
oh
know,
yeah.
I thought that I felt cheated because I felt like Star Wars. I thought Star Wars had the original Jedi mind trick, and then I see Paul and his mom doing that crazy voice thing, and I'm like, you're saying that Star Wars didn't make the original like
Nope.
guy?
And the funny thing is, even this isn't original in a lot of its concepts in science fiction. If you go back a step further into the Carpenter Mars series, like that predates this, and it has a very similar vibe of this outsider coming to a desert world and becoming a leader and religious figure to his people, who has powers beyond them. And in that case, it was just like, oh, like Earth gravity versus Mars gravity. I'm super strong here, which is like a precursor to Superman, to all of these stories. Like all of this stuff is, it's been there before in one form or another,
Right.
going all the way back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, because
Right.
Gilgamesh himself is a quasi-divine outsider coming to Uruk and becoming its leader and kind of leading people in a religious and political manner. Like it all goes back. Like these ideas are foundational to the human psyche in some ways. Um, but the funny thing about the voice and the sort of science fiction versus science fantasy aspect of Dune, this is something that doesn't get explored a lot in the visual medium of Dune. Um, the Bene Gesserit aren't magical. Like what Star Wars did was turn the Jedi mind trick and the Force into this mystical idea.
Mm-hmm.
But within Dune, what the Bene Gesserit are doing, the whole point of them is that this is an order of women who wield unfathomable political power, very quiet political power.
Okay.
But the way that they do it is with a perfect control of themselves. uh, the whole idea of their ability, the voice, and all of this stuff is they have a perfect understanding of their own biology and control over it. And like you study martial arts, so you'll probably agree with me here. Once you have that sort of mastery of self, you have a better understanding of how to manipulate and gain mastery over something outside of yourself and other people. And that's what the voice
Definitely.
is. Yeah, and
It's a
that
huge responsibility, actually.
yeah, and that's what the voice is. It's literally I have the perfect understanding of how my body reacts to vibration and sound and pitch and tone. And so I'm able to work my vocal cords in such a way that I can compel action from another. It's not magical.
It's
It's
science. It's so
it's
cool.
based on pseudoscience. Like it's
Pseudoscience, yeah,
pseudoscience,
pseudoscience.
but but it's not actually based in any sort of fantastical element, even though it looks as such, which is really fascinating.
I got so I posted that video about Dune on YouTube, and it's interesting. We got some comments. I just thought I'd like read a few of them for you. So the first one is from Hassan Ali, and he asks, so Paul in its true sense is the false messiah, right?
Um, okay, without getting into spoilers for later on in the book, from what we know right now and taking Dune, the first book, in isolation, he is not a false messiah.
I was gonna say
Uh,
he's more like the true messiah.
he is and he isn't.
Mm,
So one of the big things that the Bene Gesserit do is because they have this ability to influence other people, they wield that as part of their like long-term plan to create the Kwisatz Haderach, this perfect being that has a sort of okay. I need to get into some deep lore in order to make the Kwisatz Haderach make sense.
sure.
So there you were essentially find two forms of the Bene Gesserit. Jessica is Paul's mother, and she is a member of the Bene Gesserit, but she isn't what's called a Reverend Mother. The Reverend Mothers are a step up, and uh, the Reverend Mothers are basically in touch with their genetic history. They have the combined wealth of wisdom and knowledge from every other person that they have shared their bloodline with,
Mm-hmm.
going all the way back. It's a little bit Assassin's Creed 1, 2, and 3 that way,
Mm-hmm.
where like you have that genetic memory
That
that you
those
can access.
genes. Yeah.
And the way that they unlock that ability is with something called the Water of Life, which, ironically enough, is one of the most deadly poisons in existence.
Hmm.
Um, a Bene Gesserit who wants to test herself to become a Reverend Mother will drink this, and then using her knowledge of her own biology will try to fight off and neutralize the poison within herself.
Dude,
And
that's
in
crazy because have you heard of Wim Hof?
no, I haven't.
Okay, Wim Hof is he's known as the Iceman because of his many feats regarding cold exposure. So like this
Okay.
guy like climbed Mount Everest in shorts. He
Okay. Yeah.
swam like 50, 100 meters under ice water to the point where his like corneas froze over and he was like blind for a bit of it. But his greatest feat is that they injected like a neurotoxin in him,
Hmm.
and he says that through his breathing and meditation and stuff, he's able to control his autonomic nervous system, and fight it off. And like they proved it in a lab that like
Wow.
him, not only him, but him and his like top students can do this where normal people will get sick. Wim Hof. So it's just like it's crazy because you know
Yeah.
that shit's in a fictional book, but like some people actually do this stuff.
Well, so much of that is a matter of focus and dedication. That the Bene Gesserit spend their entire lives working towards that mastery of self, where they're able to survive the water of life. But once they do that, once they have that sort of enacted perfection of self, they unlock this next level of self-realization, which is their genetic history, and they become Reverend Mothers,
Okay.
which is and I'm sorry, I'm terrible with pronouncing her name, but the Reverend Mother that has Paul with the Gom
With the
Jabbar,
box. Okay.
yeah,
The
the pain
box.
box, the Hurdy Square,
The hurt square. Yeah.
uh, but she is a Reverend Mother, and
Hmm.
that's why she has this sort of longer view compared to Jessica, where the Bene Gesserit whole thing is like, we need the Kwisatz Haderach to save humanity from this constant cycle of political upheaval and economic turmoil. We need someone who can see even beyond what we can see, because the Reverend Mothers can see back down their timeline, and with their accumulated knowledge and wealth of wisdom, they can kind of look at a situation, see how people react and what they know about them, and kind of go, okay, you had this sort of relationship with your uncle because of the way that you hold a glass in your left hand,
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
because that's just how they read people. But and they can extrapolate from that, okay, given these conditions, you'll probably act in this way, but they don't actually have prescience, not in a real way. They can't actually see the future. They can just predict based on information. The Kwisatz Haderach is the next step beyond a Reverend Mother, where it's a male trained in the Bene Gesserit arts that manages to survive the water of life, and in doing so doesn't just unlock his genetic memory going backwards, but also going forwards throughout human history.
And that's
Uh,
that's that's so cool, man.
yeah, yeah, it's literally future memories, essentially, and the ability to manipulate how the future will go based on your visions of it. Um, so the way that that plays into Paul, the Bene Gesserit has been working for centuries to
Hmm.
create the Kwisatz Haderach, and it was the 1960s. Eugenics was still all the rage in most experimental circles, even though we got over it politically after World War II. Um, and the idea was that the Kwisatz Haderach can't be trained; he has to be bred. You need to have the proper genetic coding to allow for the intelligence, the wisdom, the physical ability to be this creature. So the way that the Bene Gesserit kind of expand their control is by going into cultures and seeing what those cultures have to offer toward this process,
Hmm.
and what they can offer the Bene Gesserit politically, and then sowing the seeds that allow them to control even those cultures from behind the scenes. So a lot of the religious aspects within the Fremen people on Arrakis, they were actually seeded by the Bene Gesserit Reverend Mothers who first came to the Fremen when Arrakis was discovered, and kind of went, okay, like, this is the desert environment, the spice is here, it does all of this stuff, but also, hey, you've got this idea of God and Shai Hulud and all of this stuff, but also there's this prophesized Messiah that's going to come and he'll lead the Fremen people, because the Kwisatz Haderach is supposed to lead everybody. Paul being the Kwisatz Haderach means that he is the prophesized prophet, but the prophecy itself is a political tool within the scope of Dune. So yeah, so that
No,
was a
that's
very
super
long answer
interesting.
for one question.
No, that's a good one. I just felt like here, I just wanted to talk about like the actual prophecies in Islam about this kind of Messiah and Antichrist type of character, and as well like what spice is in our reality. Like we
Yeah.
spice is like basically psychedelics, mushrooms, weed, that kind of stuff.
It is and it isn't. The beginning of the film makes it clear that spice, more than its narcotic and life expanding influences and its psychological uh, impact, it is a resource. And it is the most critical resource for travel, trade, and communication within the empire. And again, 1960s, oil was a big thing. We're going to the desert.
Yeah.
We know this is about Saudi Arabia
Yeah. Where it's
and
about
the British
oil. Come on.
president. It's oil because,
Okay.
like, even right now in 2021, on Halloween, October 31st is when we're recording. If even now, with renewable resources being at the same cost or cheaper to oil and gas, we don't have the infrastructure to make that change. So if tomorrow all the oil disappeared, utter chaos. Like
Definitely. Oh
society
my God.
collapses.
Mm-hmm.
We can't power anything. We can't go anywhere. Communication breaks down because we don't have electricity. All of it disappears. So oil is still what the world runs on. It's the reason for wars. It is one of those critical resources. And it's the same thing within Dune. But what's really interesting is how that affects the politics and who gets to be on top when. So within the film, we're introduced to four powers. We see the Bene Gesserit, which we talked about. You also meet the Atreides, who are our protagonists. You meet the Harkonnens, who are the antagonists. And
Yeah.
we're told about the Emperor as like this kind of distant figure, who is also clearly an antagonist to the Atreides. Uh, and those are the four major political factions. The Fremen are a part of this, but they're kind of more background. They're part of the environment, and we'll see how powerful they are. Uh, but what's really interesting is how these four powers play off of each other. The Bene Gesserit are essentially the church. They're the power of religion and a cultural zeitgeist, and their ability to tap into that. Essentially, imagine if Joel Osteen had political power. Like if he started campaigning for politicians, that's the Bene Gesserit.
Okay.
Uh, um, the Harkonnens are essentially Wall Street.
Okay. Wait. Question. Do
Yeah.
they eat people?
No, they don't eat people.
Okay. Because there's one scene. You know the scene I'm talking about, where like the Duke is there and the Harkonnen guy is there, and he's like eating something on a plate, and I was like, no, he's
No,
not
no, no,
eating
no,
what
no.
I think he's eating.
No, he's not. He's not.
Okay, all right.
This is a thing more in the novel than in. I think the mini series was the only one to do um, the Baron Harkonnen, Vladimir Harkonnen, as he's depicted in the book. His whole thing is just greed. It isn't even
Okay.
about political power for him.
Mm.
And when you see CD Prime, the Harkonnen seat of power in their core world, in the book, it's described as the city basically being in disrepair. The people are dirt poor. They live on. They have essentially a subsistence level of survival. But the Baron is so overweight, he requires like an anti-gravity belt to float so that he can waddle and walk. Like it needs to take that much weight off of him.
It's
Uh,
gross. It's so gross, bro.
yeah,
I think he's meant to be, right? Like that's greed
exa-
embodied.
exactly. He is the embodiment of greed and hedonism taken to the extreme. Um, and within the novel, he's even a pedophile. And like there were talks about an earlier cut in the film where they kind of there's like this younger
Play with
person
it.
in his quarters that they were going to play with it, and they decided not to. Which I'm kind of grateful that they didn't, because he's Skarsgård just blowing it out of the water with this menacing fat man. It's just he's so well shot to just be this sort of politically ingenious, but he's essentially one of the Koch brothers. That's
Yeah.
it. His whole thing isn't about political power. It's about growing the wealth of the Harkonnens so he can do whatever he wants and he can continue to, like there's no upper limit to what he wants. It's just more.
Okay, before you go
Yeah,
deeper,
yep,
because I
yep.
know we're gonna go deeper. So look, the Jewish people are waiting for a Messiah. The Christian
Hmm.
people are waiting for the second coming of Jesus Christ, and the Muslims are waiting for the Mahdi,
Mhm.
the second coming of Jesus Christ, and the Antichrist, or in Arabic, the Dajjal, which means the great liar.
Yeah.
So in our lore, which I'm sure influenced the author,
Yes.
100%. So the Mahdi is kind of like a regular guy who paves the way for Jesus. Jesus
Yeah.
comes, unites basically all the people who believe in God, and we all battle the people of the Dajjal, who are the, I guess, anti-God people. And the Dajjal comes out as a person who claims to be the Messiah, which is why he's called the Great Liar, and he's also able to prolong life.
Mhm.
Um, and also, I think like he kills at will and stuff, much like Pharaoh. So I just want to put that out there because I think there's a lot of stuff about that.
There is.
Yeah,
More so in the book than what we've seen so far in the film. Like you get bits of it when Paul has that vision within the tent, and he's seeing
the war.
essentially the outcome of him taking the road that he's taking. That he in embracing the role of the prophet that was seated by the Bene Gesserit, the path that they laid out for him. By doing that, he will, in effect, have a legion, millions upon millions of people take part in a holy war, waving his family's flag in the name of his father, spreading fire and bloodshed throughout the cosmos. Now,
That scene. Ah,
yeah, and the thing is that what Frank Herbert does very cleverly is that while he doesn't give specific roles throughout the lore to like the Antichrist and the people of the Dajjal and everything, he never comes out and goes, "These are the Dajjal, these are the people of the book," and everything. He just goes, "The story doesn't matter. The story is a political tool to manipulate you. The point isn't whether you're which side you're on. The point is this kid, for the sake of vengeance for the death of his father and his family, knowing that his actions will cause this level of bloodshed, still walks the path to become their prophet, knowing what it leads to.
hmm.
Is he even a hero? Why are we on their side? Why aren't we questioning these people?" And that's the point of Dune. So the ideas of prophecy and the way that it takes place and the way that it borrows from Arabian and the Abrahamic faiths and their mysticism and their mythos, that's all there for a good reason. But it also ties back into when you have a political leader saying God told them to run for office, that's your warning. Like
Yeah,
that should be your red alert. That should be the point at which you go, whoa, 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 get him off the ticket. This is dangerous. Because that kind of leadership where it's divinely inspired can also inspire those that believe in the divine to do horrific things. That was Frank Herbert's point. That
hmm.
as much as the beliefs of the Fremen are the reason why they're still alive in such a hostile environment. They give people hope, they give people something to work towards, and they grant a sense of community and unity that we need in order to survive our hardships. But when those are used politically, at that point they become dangerous. Because for the sake of his own needs, Paul will unleash a jihad across the stars, millions dead in the name of his father. And you see when he first sees that, how he rejects it, how it breaks him. But then by the end of the film, he's taking his first steps down that road.
It's all, but he's the beautiful part is that there's always the doubt, man. There's always a possibility that the prophecy is wrong, and he's just going along and doing the thing. But is he taking steps towards this massacre, this jihad that's gonna, create millions of deaths, or is he just doing what he thinks is right? And I think that's part of the fun.
It is definitely part of the fun, and trying to see if he can avoid his fate has always been an enjoyable part of these kinds of narratives, where
Yeah.
it offers the question that is your future fated, and if you can foresee the future, can you avoid that path, or does your avoidance lock you into it? The other books in the series go a little bit deeper into it, especially like Dune Messiah, the very next book,
Hmm.
and then Children of Dune and all of that deal a little bit more with precognition and uh, how that plays out. But the general point is that the similarities to religion and cultural mythos are definitely there. 6 years of research is not just about the economics of the situation. It's also about how culture affects the politics and what people will support and what they will refuse to. And
Hmm.
where you see it in the movie is with the Emperor's Master of Change, uh, that this woman is an outsider. She is an off-worlder. She fell in love with a Fremen warrior, and in her last moments, she says that she serves only one master, Shai Halud, which says something. And what it speaks to is essentially the tenacious nature of the religion of the Muslim people, that wherever we are in the world, this is like what Frank Herbert realized about our people is that we believe what we believe with a tenacity that brings other people into the fold. And you can say that that's true for just about any religion. People convert to religions all the time for a variety of reasons. Um, but with her example in the film, it's literally everyone's fighting around for the emperor's favor, and you have this woman who has the emperor's favor and rejects it for the religion of the Fremen people.
So what is shy? What is that shy Delu?
Shai Halud, it's what the Fremen call the great sandworms. They do believe in a monotheistic god, but the sandworms are essentially they basically have this saying that God created Arrakis to test the worthiness of men. And Shai Halud is the god worm, basically, that these are almost like an avatar or an aspect of God meant to test people. That okay, I'm going to go into a little bit of anthropology here. Um, People's environment will inevitably affect how cultures and religious ideas develop, because religious ideas for throughout human history have basically been our way of trying to understand the world. And a great example of this is ancient Mesopotamia. The ancient Mesopotamian gods, the legends of them that survive, show them to be capricious beyond measure. You sacrifice to them, but you never quite know what you're going to get. And it doesn't matter how much you sacrifice. If they're in a bad mood, you're all going to die.
Hmm.
And and the reason for that is that the floodplains that and the rivers, the twin rivers that Mesopotamia relied on, didn't have seasonal flood cycles. They were kind of random. And as a result of that, you never quite knew when everything that you've built towards would just wash away from you. Compare that to Egypt, where the Nile has seasonal flooding and receding cycles. They built irrigation, they built all these great empires and this amazing works of engineering. And in their culture, their gods are actually always part of this ongoing clockwork cycle.
Hmm.
Some are good, some are evil. They have this idea about the death of Osiris and his rebirth every day, and the cycle of night and day and everything. But you see how everything has its proper place that it fits into. Um, with regards to the Fremen, because they live in an environment where the spice prolongs their lives and it gives them a level of foresight and it gives them that blue on blue eye color and it
Hmm.
affects their biology, the spice is critically important to them as a people. and the production of the spice is a natural part of the sandworm's life cycle. But the sandworms themselves are the single greatest danger beyond the heat to anybody trying to live on Arrakis. So that sort of contentious struggle forms the underpinning of this culture. And it is very similar to a lot of the values espoused within Islam, being a culture from a desert, harsh environment where it came into the world at a time where you had tribal warfare constantly. You had no ideas of a unified state or even city states. It was literally individual tribes and what they could trade or fight over.
Yep.
So as a result of that,
I would also say like nature is a huge part of Islam. Like I think
absolutely,
much like the worms represent God in a way, I think nature is sort of like this. Although it can be cruel, animals and stuff sort of represent like a pure form of like creation in a
yes,
way, where humans we stand out because of our free will.
yeah, and actually, this is a fun bit of Islamic mythology. So you and I know, and the people watching this might know that within Islam there are 99 names or titles for Allah.
Right?
There is 100th name, but it is only known to the camels.
What?
Yeah,
Really?
this is an actual part of Arabian mythology.
Okay.
And I in the same way that you talk about Greek mythology, that was their religion for hundreds of years. And in the same way, I'm talking academically
Same.
about this stuff. I'm going to call it mythology.
Sure, that's
Um,
fine.
so within Arabian mythology, because camels are such a massively important part of the ecology of the desert, and our ability to survive and traverse for trade, communication, and everything, they are the sort of pinnacle creature
Mm,
for Saudi Arabia in the time that Islam came into the world.
makes
So, of
sense.
course,
It makes
they would
sense.
know the 100th name.
Right,
They're the most
right.
important thing. And in the same way, the sandworms of the desert are given this above everything else name, this godlike divine name, Shia Halud, that as much as it's talking about the worms, it has this religious aspect to it.
I got another question from that guy on YouTube. Do you want to do
Oh,
that?
hit me. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, let me see what he said here. Because he said, "Can someone help me clarify this? The Bene Gesserit actually sowed those seeds of myths in the Arrakis culture way before Paul would go there. So in reality, the Arrakis were waiting for a false messiah-like figure, and the red carpet was rolled out by the Bene Gesserit." He is very stuck on the idea of Paul as a false messiah, but is there anything
Yeah.
in there?
Um, well, it depends on what you want to call a false messiah, because when the entire mythology is a fiction meant for political power and political gain, you will never have a true messiah. It's all just a political game. There's no greater thing to it. Like, let's talk on a purely scientific scale, in the same way that the Bene Gesserit voice that comes from knowledge of the self and your ability to influence others.
Mm-hmm.
On a purely scientific scale, there is no messiah. It comes down to us. Like,
I feel like yeah, the Messiah decides to be the Messiah in a way. Like one of
or
us, anybody.
or people decide who the Messiah is. Like, what has
Yeah.
Keanu Reeves actually ever done to like garner the worship of people and try to revel in it and tell people that, yeah, I'm like this great person? People decided that, seeing his actions, that Keanu Reeves looks like he could have lived from ancient Victorian England, and he's just this wholesome, super awesome vampire dude who's nice to people, and he helps cast and crew carry equipment between sets and stuff.
Just a
He's
good
just being
human.
himself, and
Yeah.
other people put him into that position where he's like internet royalty.
Yeah.
It's like, as a function of culture and as a function of human interaction, messiahs and leaders are in part the people that pursue fame and power on that role, but it's also just what the general population push people into. Um, and what's really interesting is the Harkonnens for 80 years are on Arrakis, taking the spice and all this stuff. They're outworlders, but we never get the sense from the Fremen people that they thought that one of the Harkonnens would be their messiah. Then you get a changing of the hats, the Atreides show up, and then before Paul does anything in front of these people, they start going, wait, there's a mother and a young boy. That lines up with this one myth and everything. And we just,
Right.
all this stuff. A lot of people who, this has always been a very philosophically fraught aspect of Islam and the way that people preach and talk about Islam, that, oh, all of science is within the Quran. That is part of the sort of mythos behind the religion. But how much of it is really there? Like the Quran talks about how, oh, you were but a clot of blood and we grew you into a man. And then we're just like, with more recent scientific developments, a couple centuries later, it's just like, oh yeah, no, embryos, zygotes, and all that stuff, and it grows out and everything. You're essentially a tumor until you're useful.
Right. You're
Uh,
right. There's hints of or there's things that are said that aren't refuted by science, and
exactly.
it's very
But how
carefully
much?
said.
Exactly. It's very carefully said, and it's done in this sort of broad stroke. But by the same, I learned how to read palms as a sort of fun party trick thing,
Cool.
and all fortune telling is broad stroke statements that people find their own meaning in, and that's essentially what you see here as well. Uh, it, uh, and that is something that Dune, the book, and to a lesser extent the movie, but with regards to this idea of a messiah,
Yeah.
how much of these beliefs and everything are actually based in what is provable, and how much of it is just you connecting the dots in your own head to find something you're comfortable with.
It's
And,
fascinating,
and
bro.
and that's a really hard circle to square for most people. I freely admit that is a very difficult thing to deal with. For Frank Herbert, he was very firm in his stance, going, question it all the time. When someone says that they are taking part in your religion and they're asking for your vote, or they're saying that you need to do this thing to be good at being a person, you need to question that,
Yeah, because you
because
know what's
you don't know what
interesting?
the background is.
I feel
The,
like
the
now
Fremen
we're
people, the Fremen people don't know that all of this was a political control tool. They believe that it's all real. So to them, Paul is a true Messiah.
yeah.
But we, being a step back from it, can see that it's not, that it is just a tool of control. And it's a tool of control that Paul starts to wrap his fingers around.
Yeah, that is interesting. A few things from like the real world come to mind. So, like the separation of church and state, for example,
Mm,
in Christianity, like you have, leave unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and leave unto God what is God's, and that was key in making it so that people who were religiously powerful didn't actually like control the world in those areas. But
yep.
In Islam, actually, Muhammad was actually a both a prophet and a king, actually. So,
Yeah.
church and state in Islam are very connected, um, which is
Well,
unique.
they are connected,
Yeah.
but one of the big reasons behind that, and this does link back to Dune and the Fremen, uh, this is something that Frank Herbert really dialed into. Church and state within Islam are very closely connected, but that's because when you take a look at religious law within Islam and the example of the Prophet Muhammad as a political figure, he wasn't radically altering a lot of the political standards of the time. After the death of his first wife, he had several political marriages to bring various other tribes into the fold and
Hmm.
expand the political influence of his tribe. But that was a different thing than the religious side of things. And you see it with the pilgrimage from Mecca into Medina, where you have the prophet of this religion alive and his most devout and first followers expelled from their home. They go to this new place that doesn't trust them, that has its own laws. And what does he do? He doesn't try to spread Islam there. He just goes, we have our corner of it. We don't want to disrupt anything. We will live according to your laws because this is your land. And the way that that interplay of balance comes
Good
with
points,
the
Mosin.
religious value versus the political action is important. And it's something that a lot of our political leaders, as Muslims in the modern day, seem to ignore. Our political leaders in the Islamic world, and this is going to get a lot of people angry in the comments,
That's all good.
they play the way that Paul and the Bene Gesserit do. They use religion as a means of gaining power, whether they believe these things or not. Like, does Paul actually believe in any of the things that the Fremen believe in? He doesn't know what the Fremen believe in, but he's still using it to gain political power, to meet his own ends and like avenging his family. So,
Interesting,
like,
bro. Interesting.
yeah, it is really fascinating.
I got another point,
But
which will probably give you something to think about. So when you think about so after the prophet died, who
yeah,
leads next, right? And like, so that's where the whole Shia Sunni split really began. You got
yeah,
the Sunnis who say, it should just be based on moral character, no bloodline should be involved.
yeah.
And the Shias believe that, the family of the Prophet Muhammad should be the ones who are leading the charge. And I think that is interesting as well because Paul Atreides, he seems to have a genetic claim in a way.
He does. Now, okay, at the core of it, no one who rules Arrakis is from Arrakis. No one's a native. Um, so, so that part is important in its own way. And in terms of who leads next, and sort of this, the core problem of the houses that make up the Landsrat is that they are all based on familial inheritance. So the Harkonnens have money in the billions a week because they have a monopoly on the production and exportation of spice, the single most important resource in the galaxy. The Baron Vladimir Harkonnen has the resources to turn CD Prime into a paradise, but he doesn't. He hoards the wealth, he does all of that. Now, let's just run the thought experiment. Dave Bautista's character, Raban, rather than a brute, what if he was like the Duke Leto or like Paul, where he wants something better for the people, to lead by example rather than lead by might? When he comes to power, could he then totally change the trajectory of this political power? So that's where you have this struggle, and what the Western world and most developed nations have kind of seceded the idea to, that rulership by divine right, by monarchy, by familial lines is inherently flawed because you don't know what you're getting with the next person.
Yeah.
If they're an imbecile, they will bring your nation to ruin.
Yeah.
But you see how that political dynamic comes into play within the realm of Dune and the sort of quiet power that the Bene Gesserit have. Because the Bene Gesserit are quietly playing everyone. They're keeping these families in power and playing them off of each other to try and breed the Kwisatz Haderach. So even though this political system doesn't make sense from a logical standpoint, it's kept in place by other political powers, which is a fascinating sort of struggle there.
I agree,
But
man. It's really interesting.
I do want to just go back and connect what I was saying about Islam politically, its religious divide versus its political actions, and just link it back to the Fremen. Because you meet Stilgar, you meet the deep desert Fremen within this film. And what is immediately obvious about them, when Stilgar meets Paul and Duke Leto, is that he's a lot like the Atreides. He has his honor, he has his people, and what they need. That he
Yeah.
just goes, look, stay behind the walls, take whatever you want from the desert, but leave the desert. Don't go outward.
Mm.
And Duke Leto goes, look, we need the desert. We need the spice from the desert. It's the whole reason why we're here. But we will leave your houses and your sanctuaries in peace. Those are yours forever. We aren't the Harkonnens. We're not trying to stamp you out. You get yours so long as we get ours. And Stilgar himself goes, that's an honorable request. That's totally fair because we don't need the spice like you do. And you see that with and how that mirrors this pilgrimage from Mecca into Medina by the Prophet and his followers. That you're coming into a place, you're taking the resources and the shelter that they can provide, but you're not stepping on their toes and saying, oh, you guys have to be like us or anything. It's just like, no, do your thing, we'll do our thing. Whatever cross-pollination happens will happen organically. And if you have any questions of us, just reach out to us. That's essentially what both Stilgar and Duke Leto are doing, and it's why they work well together, and what Paul is able to come into and build something out of the Fremen with. It's this common sort of political tactic that's born out of their cultures, the family culture of the Atreides, and the sort of religious, desert nomadic, self-sufficient culture of the Fremen. Which is really fascinating.
That's awesome, man. It's so fascinating. I just really enjoyed the movie, man. Actually, you know what? Okay, first time I watched it, I actually slept, right? Because I don't think I understood why spice is so important. So I'm like, why are these guys all worked up over turmeric? You know what I mean? Like, but and then I watched the old one. I watched the 1984. And right in the beginning, there's like this weird lady who's like, spice increases lifespan and helps you bend time and space and heighten your consciousness.
Yeah, that's the important thing. The whole sort of bending of time and space, that isn't something that the spice allows the navigators to do. Okay, I'm going to go way back into Dune history here.
Sure.
Centuries before the events of the first book, you have what's called the Butlerian Jihad. Yeah.
Crazy how he just uses the word jihad. Like, he doesn't even like make up his own word.
Why? When it's a perfect word for what happens.
Yeah.
Basically, what happens is you have this first empire of humanity that reaches out into the stars, and they create actual artificial intelligences to handle things like interstellar travel and working the intergalactic economy and all this stuff. But what ends up happening as a result of that is they give so much power over to artificial intelligence. And because artificial intelligence is able to expand so much further than the human mind, they basically start to take over. And people kind of realize, wait a minute, what power do we actually have? We rely on the machines for everything.
Right.
So the Butlerian Jihad is basically this cultural and political uprising against thinking machines. Where there's this massive bloody war between the forces of these artificial intelligences and the technology they can wield versus human beings. The humans come out on top, and you see this a little bit more in the 1980s film, where you have mentats, which are basically human computers.
Is it like that guy who could like calculate real fast in the new movie?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. In the Denis Villeneuve film, the mentats that you meet are the ones that have that little stripe on their lip.
Yeah.
Within the book and within the older film, they drink this juice, the name of which escapes me right now, but it basically colors their lips like purple red. so other people know that this person, they are a biological computer. Um, and it basically increases their level of consciousness and everything, so they're able to do these insane calculations just at the drop of a hat. Because you don't have artificial intelligence and supercomputers anymore, but you still have the technology that requires that level of computation. Um,
Interesting that they want humans to have that power.
well, what's your other option? Because if you give it over to the machines again, you've just recreated what caused, you've taken the first steps to a second Butlerian Jihad.
Hmm.
Where the navigators come in is that they, rather than just having the mentat juice, they use spice, which is a more sort of like closer to origins version of that juice, which expands their consciousness further and allows them to make the navigational jumps and calculations necessary to travel through interstellar space. The actual bending of time and light and space to travel faster than light exists technologically, but without the calculations to do it safely, you end up wherever you end up. You're not getting to where you wanted to go.
Hmm.
The navigators require the spice in order to make a safe jump. The spice itself doesn't like bend time or space. It extends life. It mutates the body in excessive amounts, and it allows that expansion of consciousness that that allows people to exist without thinking machines.
I got a question on my mind.
Oh yeah.
So what makes the Harkonnens so evil? Because to me, okay, we have a greedy ruler who
Mhm.
treats his people poorly, so they're all suffering while he's like living it up. So bad leadership. But he doesn't strike me as like someone who's trying to take over the world. He just wants Dune. Oh,
Exactly.
but then again, I guess spice. Whoever controls the spice. Okay,
So,
you take it.
yeah, this is why I said the Harkonnens and the Emperor are antagonists. Like, are the Harkonnens poor leaders? Yes. Do they make the Fremen people suffer and exploit anything that they touch for its wealth? Yes, absolutely. Are those evil actions? Yes, they are. These guys are Nestle in space.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that being said, they aren't like twirl mustache evil in that
Right.
way. Like if the reason why they hate the Atreides is because despite the fact that the Harkonnens have all the money, the Atreides are still their rivals. And this is like an interesting political balance. The Emperor is power concentrated, it's political power concentrated. The Harkonnens are economic power. The Atreides are leadership roles. The Atreides are essentially populists. They are this family who, as Duke Leto says, we answer all calls. We break no bonds.
Mm.
That these people are an inspiration to the other houses of the Landsrat of this is what we could be. This is the dream. This is what leadership should look like. The emperor and his family are only concerned with maintaining their rulership, which is why they place the Harkonnens in charge uh, of Arrakis, because the Harkonnens are only interested in wealth and getting fat. They don't have actual political aspirations to challenge the emperor. But the Atreides, through their populism, they are a direct political threat to the emperor, which is why he works with the Harkonnens to destroy the Atreides, um, because they're a political threat. They aren't an economic one, they're barely even a military one,
Mm.
but they inspire people. They inspire the other noble houses. And if a straight up fight happened openly, the emperor doesn't know how many of the houses would actually side with him versus siding with the Atreides. Because with the Atreides, the houses can negotiate better favor and better positions from where they're at now. and the Atreides would probably give it to them.
That's
Whereas
cool.
it's really it is fascinating. But like I do love that you picked up on that. Like, why are these guys evil? Like, in what way are they evil? The Harkonnens are just greedy, and the Emperor just wants to hold on to the power that he already has. The threat comes from populism.
Okay. Can we talk? Because you know what? I think we've gone through an hour, I think. We didn't even do anything. All we did was like we just scratched the surface of like everything. But like, how about we end talking about Jason Momoa's character and the idea of martyrdom in Dune, because you know I know that in the West, like martyrdom has been pretty much demonized, but if you even go back to World War II, anybody fighting for any side is pretty much willing to die for the cause,
Yeah.
and that's kind of like we see that in the new movie many
Mhm.
times. Trying not to spoil anything, so I'm not gonna say who, but it happens.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think about that?
So I think martyrdom, in large part, depends on your point of view. Like, in the West, martyrdom of a certain sort has been vilified, but they still actively take part in it. The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, Never Forget 9/11, all of these are ideas of martyrdom. It comes from the same sort of root thought process. And it's reflective of a culture. Uh, the cultural idea being that, look, these individuals died needlessly or senselessly, or they're, in a way, it's even, well, it's not really dehumanizing, but it's less personal. That people always say, remember the victims of 9/11, and you have text boxes of all of the victims. How many people can actually name the victims? But a political martyrdom is a different thing. A political martyrdom is a specific individual, and after they die, what's done in their name. And a really good example of this is Gandhi, that Gandhi's assassinated, and for decades, and even until now, you have people invoking his name for any number of things. You have, like, within India, you have restaurants and like diet plans and all of this stuff named after him,
Hmm.
which is a little weird in its own way.
Hmm.
Um, but with regards to Dune, like, martyrdom, the whole point of martyrdom is to inspire those that are left behind, the people that remember. Um, and in that sense, because we're following Paul Atreides, the martyrs that we see are the people close to him and the people that help him and his family, that give their lives to protect him and to protect his family. Um, that being said, we saw in the movie how many members of the Harkonnen inner circle also die during this assassination attempt. Um, the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen himself is almost killed. Um, so
Right.
I,
I
I,
guess we
I,
can't say anything about it, but
just like everything else, it is, and this is core to Frank Herbert's intentions with this novel.
yeah.
Um, martyrdom is just another political tool that it's really telling in the film. Paul's vision of this jihad isn't in his name, it's in his
His
father's name,
father's
who's
name.
died.
Right. Right. Right.
It's the Atreides flag, but the name that they're chanting is Leto. It's not Paul, despite the fact that Paul Muad'Dib is their prophet, is their Messiah, um, at least as far as we know. There is more to this, that comes up in later books.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to go into that. I don't want to spoil that. But hey, if you want to sit down and actually talk to me for another like 2 hours
Yeah.
about like what's coming down the line and how a lot of these ideas interplay off of each other and where it all ends up, I'm more than happy to do that. If like you guys listening enjoy anything about what we're doing here.
No, I think like look, man, people at least that one guy on YouTube is really happy that we're connecting the dots between just religion in general and but probably specifically Islam and Arab culture and Dune. And I just wanted to check the comments and make sure that I'm not missing any cool thing that might we might be able to bring in.
Well,
Imtiaz,
while you're looking, hold
yeah,
on, sorry, while you're looking at that, something that I want to point out, which was just an interesting parallel. This is for you viewers out there.
yeah.
Um, how many of you know the story about Christopher Columbus and the lunar eclipse? So this is actually a really fun thing. Christopher Columbus comes to the natives in Jamaica and tells them, "Hey, you gotta follow Catholicism
Mm-hmm.
because all your religions and everything are wrong." And they just go, "What the hell are you talking about?" And he just goes, "The moon will disappear," because he knew that there was a lunar eclipse coming.
Right.
So, so he goes, "The moon will disappear, and it will be the end of the world unless you repent." And when he says that, the moon starts to
To
vanish.
vanish.
And
Okay.
and people start freaking out, going, "Oh my God, like the world is ending, like the moon
Yeah.
is disappearing." When he said it would. So they like call out their conversion and ask for repentance and everything from this God that they've never heard of before. Columbus goes into his hut and uses an hourglass to time the eclipse, and as it's about to end, he comes out and he says, "Okay, I've prayed for you all, and God has forgiven you, and he'll give the world back." And that's when the crescent of the moon becomes visible again, as the lunar eclipse ends, which is insane.
Yeah, I
And
guess
it's
there's the
not
different
different,
the power of knowledge in a way can be abused.
but it's not different
Yeah.
to how Paul puts himself into the mythologies of the Fremen people. It's exactly the same. The
Hmm.
way that he puts on a still suit without having ever seen it before. And it just makes sense to him because of this baseline precognition that he has. That's just
When you
him
when you
using
say
a couple of
precog,
little events.
is that just intelligence or like
So this
ability
is
to see the future a little bit?
Yeah, precognition. It is his ability to see the future, and we talked about it kind of like an hour ago about.
Sorry.
No,
Oh
no,
my God, I'm terrible, man.
no. You know that I can talk forever, and this is a very big mug of coffee.
Okay, good.
uh, but yeah, he does have. He's developing this ability to see the future in a more refined way.
Right, like the
Um,
spice makes it better, but he has an above average baseline.
Yes, because he is the product of this breeding program.
Okay,
This isn't really a spoiler
I don't think it
of
is.
anything. It's kind of something that was left out of the movie that was in the book. The Bene Gesserit wanted his mother Jessica to only bear children because the Bene Gesserit have control over their biology. They can decide if they're having a boy or a girl. Um,
Hmm.
they wanted Jessica to only bear a female children to Duke Leto because they had hoped that her child or any one of her daughters would one day marry one of the Harkonnen family line, and the two bloodlines together would produce the Kwisatz Haderach.
Okay.
Jessica, however, because she actually loves the Duke Leto more than she has her political ties to the Bene Gesserit, because he wants an heir to his family, she bears him their son,
The
Paul.
sun. Mm.
And which is why the Reverend Mother and counsel to the Emperor is so like, "I told you, only daughters."
Only women.
And
Yeah.
now we might have someone that is possibly the Kwisatz Haderach a full generation or 2 generations early, and we are not ready for this.
Yeah.
Uh,
Can we also just say that the whole Arrakis thing and like going after spice, like to be written in the 1960s, pre our Iraq invasion, was it's just kind of eerie to me.
because you already had so many examples of colonization and political influence within that region for one reason or another. It used to be for Silk Road trade routes and access to waterways and stuff to open up more trade into the east. And then gold, oil, all of these various things were discovered underneath the sands and in throughout those lands. And suddenly everything became way more politically fraught. Anyone that wants to have a lot of fun with it, take a look at the early history of the current ruling family of Saudi Arabia, because you will see the same sort of political influences where outside powers are funneling money and arms to various different players, trying to make sure their side comes out on top.
Hmm.
It's not that different than today, and that sort of cyclical nature of history is kind of what Frank Herbert's talking about. That look, you guys are letting yourselves be manipulated by your leaders. Stand on your own, question them, stop playing into their narratives. Because look at Paul's narrative. He knows what he's doing will require and cause bloodshed on a hitherto unimagined scale, but he's still doing it for his own gain.
That's a perfect place to end. So I think Mohsen, you've been such a good help, man. Can you do me a favor and name this series? It needs to be one word and then culture. So it could be nerd culture, geek culture. It could be asking men. Uh,
Please don't call it asking man. Oh my god, no. No, no, no,
I
don't do
thought you'd
that.
say that.
uh, I think lore culture would be a good thing for this series where we're talking about sort of like deep dives into the lore of not just Dune, but any sort of thing that's in the sort of nerdy cultural zeitgeist. I
Okay.
think lore culture would be a lot of fun.
Awesome, man. Then you get to be the namesake of it. Lore culture it is. This is the episode one. And to anybody who watched, thank you for watching. Make sure you leave us comments and let us know any questions you have because this is just the first one, I hope. And for more stuff like this, visit culturetoronto.com. We do have merch like Mosin's hat or Mosin's shirt and my hat. Um, uh, from our studio, Otese. Otese is the Japanese word for handmade and homemade. And we'll see you next time. Peace. Okay, let me just hit end record.
On a squirrel, yeah. You watch a movie, you think it's like that, yeah. You watch a TV show, you think it's like that, yeah. You read a book and you think it's like that, but it hasn't been like that for very long. Because society hasn't developed the technology to place their stories and constructs in the philosophical medium that's entertaining for us to understand. And plus, there's so many of us here on this planet, we need a system to organize ourselves in a way that makes us feel like we